Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my podcast, Ask Me Anything. I've gone through plenty of ups and downs in my life and I've learned a lot along the way. But now that I've got a midlife crisis reinvention under my belt, I know it's never too late to learn something new. That's why on this podcast, I'm going to be talking to Kiwis from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. Well, another election year has come around. I think it's always important to understand politics, but especially in election year, we all need a good grip on politics and our politicians. Today, that's exactly what we're going to focus in on. How to make sense of politics in 2023. Obviously, I know a fair bit in this area, but to help me out, I think I've called in one of the best. Newstalk ZB senior political correspondent Barry Soper. Barry has worked at the Beehive for 43 years through 11 different prime ministers, a lot of MPs. When it comes to understanding politics and politicians, Barry knows all. Hi, Barry. This is a bit of a turning of the tables.
Hello, Paul. I just want you to be kinder on me than I was on you when you were in politics. The boot is on the other foot, and that's very unusual.
I was thinking exactly the same thing this morning when I was thinking about talking to you. I was just like, well, this is a complete reversal. And then I was like, I've been desperately trying to think of something really
nasty to say.
Not so much nasty, but something you wouldn't want to answer. And then I can go, that's a political answer. But I'm not sure I have come up with any.
You'll come up with one.
Yeah, I bet I will as we're going.
Yeah.
Hey, my housekeeping is really easy for this. So the first is I'm allowed to ask you anything, but you don't have to answer.
Fine.
And that's actually a really good one. And you would get that with politicians and with anyone. And I get that genos get really angry when politicians don't answer exactly what they want. But particularly on personal, you really don't have to answer questions that people put to you.
No, you don't. But the problem with politicians is you usually know the answer yourself and you know what they should be saying, but they don't say anything. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Politicians, I've found over the years, are verbose to the extent that they talk themselves around a corner and sometimes a door opens and they go in and it's too late to rescue themselves. So that's the difficulty, I think, with interviews, as you'd well know.
Yeah. Well, I've certainly been there and I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go through. Secondly, which is absolutely, this is a no judgy zone. I just don't go in for that kind of crap. Okay, icebreaker questions. Favourite book? Have you got a favourite book that you're reading to Iggy at the moment?
Awesome Dad, I think.
Why wouldn't you?
No, he likes Harry McCleary from Donaldson's Dairy.
It's got a great rhythm to it, eh?
That's right, yeah. He likes looking at the pictures. What I do every night when I put him to bed is I give him a choice. I hold two books in front of him, and he's only 11 months, but he loves choosing, and he'll point or grab at one book, and I normally read that to him. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And that's so part of that cognitive development as well, is learning, how to control your emotions and then also the power of choice like that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He's an amazing little chap and I enjoy him immensely.
Have you got a favourite karaoke song?
Oh, God, what it used to be until I actually stood there and listened to myself, thought, no, I don't have a voice for singing. It was New York, New York. But no, not now. I've long since passed that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I was one of those that I think I'm a lot better than I am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's normally after a couple of drinks that's the problem, Paulie.
Yeah.
You think you can really belt them out.
Yeah.
No.
And we used to have the odd karaoke nights with the National Park.
Oh, absolutely.
Parliament.
Jerry Brownlee was a bit of a lad on the karaoke machine.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of his favourite. Of course, Lockwood Smith.
Well, but he's a natural, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
I went to his wedding and he sang his vows.
Wow.
I mean...
Wow, that's other level, isn't it?
In an operatic fashion.
Yeah, I can quite imagine it. I don't know if I want to imagine.
No, don't.
Simon Bridges, he liked a song or two.
Yeah.
I used to sing to him, You're So Vain.
That's right. His dancing was needed a bit of work on it, I think.
Okay, a highlight or most important person you met throughout your career?
Look, undoubtedly it was Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
I met him on several occasions and count myself as very lucky to have met him. I first met him in Harare. In fact, I introduced Nelson Mandela to Jim Bolger.
Wow.
We were at a cocktail function at Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Harare. Nelson Mandela at that stage had not long been released from prison, so he certainly wasn't the president of South Africa, so he wasn't entitled to be there. And he wasn't at the cocktail function until very late in the piece, and we were making our way to the door. Jim Bolger was getting a bit bored, and the door burst open, the exit door burst open, and this African man in a jalaba came running up to me, and he said, "Are you with the Prime Minister?" And journalists never like being with the Prime Minister. We're covering a Prime Minister. But before I could say anything, he said, "I'd like you to introduce him to this man." And in walked Nelson Mandela.
Wow.
So Jim Bolger looked up and basically knocked people over to get there, and I didn't need any introduction. Bolger invited Nelson Mandela to breakfast the next morning. So it was great that we got to meet him. And then I went to his inauguration, went to his funeral. My biggest achievement, I think, in the Parliamentary Press Gallery was writing to the ANC when he came out here for a Commonwealth Leaders meeting and got him to have dinner for the Parliamentary Press Gallery's 125th anniversary. So it was incredible.
God, I hope for the generations to come that he is remembered and well read, and people just genuinely continue to recognise what an extraordinary leader, eh?
Yeah, very sad though, in a way, Paula. And, you know, when you talk politics, he was in many ways too old to be the president of South Africa, and certainly to see the change that he oversaw. And I've been going back to South Africa probably on an annual basis with my wife. You know, South Africa hasn't improved in the way that Mandela expected it to do so.
True.
I mean, you've still got those awful settlements and racism is alive and well. And Mandela had hoped that things would have been totally different. So like I said, it came too late in the piece for him, unfortunately.
And he sacrificed decades, though, to get the change.
27 years.
Yeah.
You know, it's a long time.
Yeah, and we probably wouldn't have got that change if he hadn't made that kind of sacrifice with that kind of, obviously.
Well, politically, you look at the change and it's incredible when you think that it's black rule and the minority whites who had ruled the country for so long are now simply citizens and not the leaders of the country, which is extraordinary. No real bloodshed to speak of, although murders happen so often there that people lose count.
And so let's bring that then a little bit closer to home, because, you know, you sort of talk about change and you talk about change in a political sense. And we've certainly seen politics change. I mean, I've been actively involved for, probably 25 years. And if I look back and reflect, can think about, for women in particular in Parliament, just how much it's changed in that
Absolutely.
time. In a relatively short period of time, in all aspects really, and how much more family friendly and that sort of thing it is. So Parliament itself has changed, but equally I think politics and people's access to it from a New Zealand point of view, you will have seen that change, and do you think it's improved and it's better now than it was?
Absolutely. You know, when I started in the Press Gallery in 1980, there were just a handful of women in the gallery itself and a handful of women in Parliament. And now the gallery is dominated by women, more women than men. I think it's a great thing. You know, I'm a great advocate for the participation of all genders in Parliament. It's a better place for it, although a lot of people would say, well, what a bloody mess the place is, because politics at the moment, I think, is probably more messy than I've seen it in years, but it is what it is.
But is that not a reflection on society in itself, and that perhaps in the old days it was kind of so structured and everybody was like-minded in their thinking that actually it did look smoother, and, you know, there were very few people in charge. They made the decisions. You shut up in the back row. You don't speak until you're bloody spoken to, until you've got your wheels on. And now it's probably more reflective of society in general, and that there are such different personalities. It's chaotic at times.
Well, that's MMP, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that changed the whole face in 1996, changed the face of politics. I mean, first past the post, you had, for example, the party that you still belong to, but you're a representative of, the National Party, for 3 successive elections in the late 70s and early 80s, got fewer votes than what Labour did, but Muldoon hung on to power until 1984. So, you know, that is unfair. here. It's messy because what you really do is now have a true House of Representatives, which is what it's meant to be. And so you get people off the dole into Parliament. You know, it's what society is, but it doesn't say a lot for cohesion. It's a much more difficult place, I think, to manage.
Can we talk a bit about party politics? Because I don't think everybody understands it. And whenever someone is thinking about going into politics and asks for my advice, I always say to them, look really, really, really closely at the party you're going to stand for, because there will be times when you will be tested and you won't agree with what they're doing, and you have to be able to hold your tongue and actually stand next to it and stand with it. But are we getting too party political in that people can't stand up and have an opinion anymore, you know, because if it's even slightly different than what their leader may have said, you know, then all of a sudden it's a big story and it's a drama and everything else. So we're getting to a point where those party politics dominate so much that even though we might have individuals, they're not able to voice an individual opinion on legislation or society in general.
Yeah, because you've got a whip system, and the whip, a lot of people probably don't understand what a whip is, but a whip is the head boy or the head girl. And if you want leave from Parliament, as you'd well know, to go out to a dinner or whatever, you've got to get the permission of the whip. And I remember Margaret Wilson, the former Speaker of the House, saying that the hardest aspect of politics that she initially felt was being whipped all the time, that, you know, you can't be yourself because you're there at the behest of your political party. And if the House is sitting at night, you're expected to be there, or at least within the precinct, so that you can be called for a vote. So it is tough. It's a regime that you've really got to get used to. It's like going back to school for many, because most of them are living away from home. They're living in flats. And it is like going back to school or university. It's a very unusual environment, and that's probably why it's messy at times.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. I drink far more now that I'm out of Parliament than I did when I was there.
Well, I think you're a wise woman.
Well, people say, oh, there's all boozing down there and everything else. But as you just pointed out, the reality was, and particularly when I was in senior roles, right, I could be called into that house at 9 o'clock at night.
Right.
And so for me, I'm an all or nothing girl, right? So I wouldn't even have one glass of wine if there was any risk. And then particularly when I was deputy leader in opposition, I had a real responsibility to run the place at night if something went wrong. And so actually, as you say, that control, people don't really understand, you know, how much it controls your life. Not that it's all about drinking, but I'm just sort of showing the sort of level of discipline that you have to have. Well,
you know, it's interesting when you go back prior to MMP, when they had the first past the post. I remember Muldoon was legendary for drinking and coming into the House. And I remember one night there was an appropriation debate, which is basically, as you would know, voting money for the budget. Muldoon came into the House and he stood there for a full 5 minutes swaying back and forth, calling out, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker. I remember David Long, he yelled out, over here, Rob, over here. And Muldoon sort of looked over and almost fell over, obviously drunk. And drinking is less frequent around the place than what it was in those days. But the discipline is different because you have so many parties there now.
Yeah, that's right. And there are different rules, and let's talk about that from a journalist perspective, and that there are still some nice quirks of it, if you like, that in general a journalist won't report on family unless it's absolutely relevant to your portfolio or something that you're doing in that respect. And I think there is that level of respect. Although you've got a lot of newer ones coming through and people wanting to make their mark. And there used to be a bit of parties and things like that. And in general, it's still there, but it does feel like it's not as sort of staunch as it used to be.
I think politicians are more afraid of the media now than what they once were, because we had an unwritten rule, and I still have it, that if you're having a drink with a politician, if you're at their caucus, at a caucus function, or you're in Bellamy's in the Beehive, then what you're told there, you don't report. You don't report on the politician. You hear a lot of scuttlebutt. You can follow it up in other ways, but you don't attribute it to anyone. But it's a good place for information as long as you don't land somebody in it, and that's the way politics works.
Yeah. And do you think it's still like that?
Well, look, I don't socialise as much with the gallery these days, and because I'm away from Wellington now. But, you know, I would hope that they still apply the same rules.
You know that I've completely reversed how I'm supposed to do my podcast. because I'm supposed to be doing this bit in the second half. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep going with this advice on politics, and then we're going to talk a bit more of the personal because I want to hear about Iggy. Yeah. And so I'm just going to mix it up a bit and do it back to front so that it's just a bit more interesting for the beginning of the year. So
Iggy's the most interesting. We should have.
Oh my God, we should. Sorry. I know. I was supposed to start with.
That's all right. Carry on.
But, we just sort of went down that rabbit hole, and sometimes you just...
It's like I said at the beginning, Paula, that you walk around a corner and then you get into a door and...
Did you get to a point where you knew what politicians were going to say before they...
Always.
Yeah.
Always. I mean, sometimes it's pointless asking a question because you know what the answer will be. Politicians, and I think in particular, somebody like Jacinda Ardern was so pre-rehearsed that when you were going to ask the question, you would know exactly what she was going to say. And she never liked being interrupted because I did a sit-down with her in December. And you can see it on ZB Online, and you'll see the frustration that you ask her a question and the answer is totally unrelated to the question.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating, to say the least.
So did she get to a point where what people loved her for in the beginning, they hated her for in the end?
Oh, totally. She polarised people so much, and that's the problem with populist politics when you think about it. I likened her to David Lange. That David Lange, when he first got in 1984 after the snap election, was loved by the public.
Yeah.
And the public suffered greatly in that first 3 years, 22% interest rates and inflation out of control. But everybody felt that after the icebox that Muldoon had them living in, that things had to change. So they accepted that, and they got a second term simply by just saying, we need to finish the business, but after that it all fell apart. I think that he was a bit of a show pony Prime Minister, and I think she was the same, a show pony. And, people loved the idea of the personality, but when you got down to the nitty-gritty and the policy and the answers to questions, they were never there.
No. I've said it before, a personality trait that actually I think John Key has as well is that they did love to be loved.
Oh, I asked them that question once.
Yeah, because I don't care.
Yeah,
to be quite blunt with you. I mean, of course I care at a level.
Yeah.
But I honestly, I was talking to one of your senior journos the other day, and she said to me, the one thing that's always surprised me is you didn't really care. And I went, as long as I felt true to myself and what I was doing, I didn't mind that I polarised. Yeah. But whereas those two did.
Oh, and John Key, the thing I think that made John Key more successful, certainly, than Jacinda Ardern was that he was self-deprecating.
Yeah.
He made a dick of himself on so many occasions, falling off catwalks and breaking legs at Chinese festivals and doing derpies at universities.
Planking with his son.
People love that. I remember going on the first trip that John Key did, and we were in the islands. He did the hula. He said to me on the plane on the way back, he said, I think I might have made a bit of a dick of himself there. And I said, no, that people love seeing that sort of crap. And they do. People, and as long as then he's prime ministerial when that's required.
Yeah, yeah. And she couldn't quite laugh at herself the same way,
no,
could she?
Not at all.
No. That kind of school prefect sort of thing, eh?
Very much so.
So do people voting this year, do they vote on issues that affect them personally?
Yep.
Or do they do?
Yep. Always.
But should they be looking wider than that and trying to understand the policies, particularly in the times that we are as far as interest rates and potential recessions in the horizon and that sort of thing? How much of it is looking at the bigger picture or really thinking what's best for me?
People don't look at the bigger picture. I mean, Rob Muldoon once said, put money in their hip pocket and you'll have their vote.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth in that people do vote on what's good, what they believe is good for them. The academics would say, look further out and look at the macro picture of politics and, how the country does is more important than how you're doing personally. But people aren't like that. People, they relate, and they'll relate to Chris Hipkins much more, I believe, than they've in recent years related to Jacinda.
Which he's a nice guy.
He's down to earth. He's a hut boy, as he says. Down to earth guy. He's self-deprecating.
I was going to say he can laugh at himself.
Yeah, he does. And so he's a different kettle of fish. But I think there is a real mood out there. There's a malaise in the country. And I'll tell you what, this last summer won't have helped, that people are feeling miserable because they haven't essentially had their summer holiday.
Yeah.
And if that's Jacinda Ardern's nuclear-free moment, move me into the sun, please.
And we're going to head into winter, which is going to be awful.
Tough.
We're going to have wait lists in hospitals that are going to be longer than ever. We're going to have the cost of living continue to rise. We are going to see real changes. If people don't feel fully on top of politics, what would your advice be, Barry? Where is the best place to get your information or best thing to do to get perhaps a greater understanding?
Newstalk ZB.
Hey.
Of course.
Well, you get lots of opinions on it.
Well, I think the problem for the media at the moment is, and it stems from the COVID period, that they had what Jacinda Ardern christened the pulpit of truth. That assumed that everything that they said from the pulpit was truthful. And day after day after day, she was speaking or preaching from the pulpit of truth. And the media, they were looked to be somewhat impotent, I think. So a great distrust during that period, I think, built up for the media, which was really unfortunate because, the truth always didn't come from the pulpit. And one good example, very briefly, is that in that first month from the pulpit, they talked about the lockdowns. Well, a story that yours truly did found that the lockdowns initially were illegal.
Yeah.
And it was upheld by the High Court. Well, people should be able to be challenged. The media have no bent in terms of pushing agendas, my belief, that the media are there for a good story. If it's a good yarn, they'll do it. So I think still the media is the best place if you really want to know what's going on.
I actually really agree with you. When I was in politics and people would say they didn't like X journalist or whatever, and then they'd say, I can't believe that story they did on you last night. And I went, well, tomorrow night will be different. And actually, it's not personal. No. I did make a mistake, and I made a dick of myself. Or I might disagree with what you've done, but hey, that's sort of life. You've got a job to do. I've got a job to do. You'll be, I won't agree with everything you do. You won't agree with everything I do, but you get on with it because it is a job to do. And I used to, particular ones that people would attack, I'd say, well, they would attack Labour as much as they would attack National. It's actually not personal. Well,
and people like me, as I've said to Jacinda Ardern's chief press secretary once, because they complain, and I said, look, Andrew, see us as the theatre critic. We comment on stuff. Generally, we give a critique of it. And it's nothing personal, it's how we see it. Yeah. And after 40 plus years in politics, I think I'm entitled to have a say.
Yeah. So you do think people can trust the media?
Yep.
And do you think, but is TV a bit different in that it's a bit more dramatised, or, because you get to go on and give an opinion, right?
Yeah.
You've got an analysis that, as you say, has got decades, a background to it. Is there some merit for some that just feel it's all a bit light and fluffy now?
Well, unfortunately, by its very nature, television is quite superficial. The stories are short. The analysis is very short. Dare I say it, in my time, they used to have political shows devoted to the issues of the day. Yeah. And you would have debates on television at night. Long since gone, and I think that's a great pity. Yeah.
Okay, Barry, we're going to come back. We're just going to have a short break and then a segment after that where we're just going to quickly talk a bit about Iggy and your personal life and where you're heading over the next few years.
Thank you.
I have Newstalk ZB senior political correspondent Barry Soper with me today. We've been talking politics, but now we're going to talk, Barry, a bit about the change in your life. So you've moved to Auckland recently.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you, Jeffers. We're sort of at the stage, which is always really difficult in people's lives, selling houses and buying. But we're buying on a flat market and selling on a flat market. So,
same market.
It doesn't make you feel very good, though. But
no,
anyway,
it doesn't. But hey,
it is
what it is. I was at the airport a few months ago and I bumped into Catherine Rich, who of course you would know.
She's a relation of mine. Her mother was a Soper.
Well, there you go.
We're all related down south.
Oh, my gosh. So anyway, Catherine and I talking away, out come our photos of our grandchildren like we do. And then I am not kidding you, Barry, her and I just looked at each other and just went, do you live for photos of Iggy? I'm not kidding. So here's these two middle-aged women in the airport who just genuinely looked at each other. So Barry and Heather have got the cutest, who obviously us middle-aged women live for photos of, Iggy. And how old is he now?
11 months.
11 months, wow. And so you're a hands-on dad this time round.
I've been sort of the primary caregiver, they call it, last year. Iggy's my 6th child, so I've been there, done that. And I've had to explain to my older kids and apologise to them that when you have your first families, you tend to be pursuing your career, trying to make money, buying houses, so you don't have the same time. Now I'm an old geezer and far too old to be having kids, but nevertheless, there you go. And he has been fantastic. He's the joy of my life. He's just wonderful. Being at home and watching his development day by day, it fills me with absolute joy. I mean, I've never experienced anything quite like it.
They're the best time wasters in the world, aren't they?
Well, you wonder where the bloody time goes, that you're trying to balance stuff and you just don't get the time. And you'd know that. You were a very young mum.
I was an absolutely young mum, and then, and as I say, I've got grandchildren, and you can just sort of sit there and go, well, 2 hours has just disappeared and all I've done is baby talk. And been absolutely amazed that this is the most intelligent baby that's ever.
Oh, that's right, of course.
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Absolutely smarter than most.
Yeah.
So child number 6, Barry, have you got advice for young parents that are, as you said, they are trying to juggle mortgages and careers and families and relationships, and what would you say to them?
Look, I'd say, and I've often said it to young people with their first child, your life is going to change forever. And it does. My mother used to describe it and say, you're having a child is like having a soul outside your body. And I think, it's to that extent you give everything to your child because your child is the most important thing really in your life, and you've got to nurture them from the day they're born until the day you die.
And give yourself a break.
If you can, if you're fortunate enough.
And you don't have to be perfect all the time, and you're allowed to think that the dishes sit in the bloody sink. And
if you're angry and frustrated, that's part of being a parent, but never take it out on the child. It's not the child's fault. But, of course you're allowed feelings of frustration because it's a frustrating old business.
So how are you juggling part-time work then with, as you say, a fairly full-time parenting role, trying to maintain marriage, I imagine, as well?
Yeah,
our relationships still need working on.
Oh, too right. Yeah. No, it's. I often think now, Paula, now I know what I know. I take my hat off to women for staying at home with their kids, and I didn't really appreciate it fully until I've done it. And I take my hat off even more to what you once were, was a solo mum. How on earth you cope as a solo mum, I'll never know. That it's so hard, emotionally, every which way, work-wise.
And lonely, actually.
And lonely, because you've got a little baby. So I take my hat off generally to women that do it. And it's sort of opened my eyes totally to child rearing and just how difficult it can be. But it's so joyful as well when you see the way they develop. There's nothing on earth quite like it.
Yeah.
Last year, you asked me how I cope. Well, for 2 hours a day, I had a nanny come in, basically to keep Iggy away from the microphone. And this year, we've got another wonderful nanny here in Auckland, and she's working a little bit longer. So I'll have a bit more time to come into the office and what have you, and maybe write a few and stuff. Yeah, it's as you say, it's coping. You've really got to...
and good on you for acknowledging that. And we should acknowledge solo dads out there as well, because there's so many of them doing an amazing job raising their children too. But at least, at least you've got an adult conversation. You haven't just got adult conversation, you've got one of the most intelligent, bloody broad, well-read and knowledgeable woman that you're married to in Heather. So your conversations would be at another level, but at least you've got that sort of stimulus as well. Whereas, as I just say, there's moments for those sole parents when it can be long nights and long days and feeling like it's all about the same.
Yeah, no, it's a great experience, and I don't regret one moment of it.
So more babies, do you think?
Not going to tell you that on this particular podcast, but who knows? Who knows?
So you didn't have to answer.
That's right. Well, that was a no answer, really, was it?
That's none of your business, because it's not. It's really, it's absolutely not. But hey, you never know, do you? So, a long time in the Beehive and in Parliament. Do you miss it? Do you think you will miss it?
I'll miss certain aspects of it, when there's leadership changes, when big announcements are made. You miss the cut and thrust, which I enjoyed. And I remember when I came into Parliament, initially I came in as political editor, so I was the boss at the beginning.
Yeah.
And when I came in, I thought, I'll have a couple of years in this job, as you do in your late 20s, because I'd been a journalist at that stage for about 10 years. So I thought I'll, come in for a couple of years and then move on to something else, which I'd always done. But politics gets into your blood.
Yeah,
it's a fascinating business, and it's not just about policy, because it's about people, actually. And I found the people that I've dealt with, and particularly prime ministers, which I'm writing about at the moment.
Oh, cool.
Prime ministers are fascinating people because they've all got their quirks. They all think they're doing the best for the country, but at times, unfortunately, they're not doing very well at all.
Have you ever thought about jumping ship? So had you thought about either going in as a press secretary or becoming a Member of Parliament?
No. Well, Member of Parliament initially, I thought maybe after a few years that's what I might do, but then I realised just what sort of a business it was. Press secretaries, I had many opportunities, but never taken it up. Just wouldn't be me. I remember once I was offered a job in PR and it was really good money. I thought, hang on, I couldn't make up my mind, and it was offering me much more than I was on. So I went to an industrial psychologist, and on the couch, and at the end of it, the psychologist said to me, Barry, I think you've made up your mind. And I said, oh yeah, what have I decided? And he said that you're going to go to PR. And I thought, what the hell do you know? Back in Parliament, and had a great time, and it reinvigorated me, so I was quite happy with my choice.
Are you going to be screaming at the radio and the TV? I feel like you might be. Because
I do it now.
And especially with journalists that are not asking the questions that you think they should. Because I remember that time in lockdown when you couldn't get to the Prime Minister's pulpit of truth, where she stood up there and dictated what questions she would take and how she would do them. And then you did get there and she didn't like you very much.
No.
But do you think you're going to sit there screeching at those young journalists and,
There's an element of that, but I don't think I'll watch it with such intensity, although part of my job is I have to watch them because I have to know what's going on. So, there'll be aspects of it, but I do have colleagues that I can text at the press conference and say, ask him this, and they generally do. So, you still got a bit of an influence.
What's a question then that you wish you could have asked politicians but you probably haven't?
Well, it's to you in particular, I suppose. Do you miss, since you've been out, do you miss the limelight?
Oh, yeah, this is, you can ask me anything. No. But then about 6 months afterwards, I didn't miss politics at all, but I realised I still needed a stage occasionally.
Yep.
So that's part of my personality.
Do you miss the cut and thrust?
Yes. I quite like the bluntness and the intellectual stimulant of it, but not to the point that I'd ever go back. I mean, people, you shouldn't go back. You're done, and I am done. Yeah. So I realised I needed a stage, and so then I'm lucky enough that I do enough keynote speaking. I'm lucky enough to be doing this podcast, which I love. So I kind of now have got a really good balance of having, because I am the classic introvert extrovert. I love being home alone and,
like me.
Down
I like that too.
Yeah. And then it's like, oh, what about, I need something to be about me for a while, Shall we talk about me? So I sort of worked that out. But I'd got to the stage there, I remember Bill English calling me in and him saying to me, I'm going to resign. And I got all teary and he looked at me and went, oh, for God's sakes, don't get emotional. And I went, I'm crying for me, not you. I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And that was because I was an electorate MP and I would never cause a by-election, right? Yeah. And it was at that point I thought, oh, your time's going to come up. It's not now.
Yes.
Because I'm committed. So I'm a big girl, suck it in.
The other question I'd like to ask you is, because I remember on the election night when Winston Peters chose Jacinda Ardern to be the Prime Minister, and National, I think, was 7% ahead on polling day. And I remember standing in the Beehive and interviewing Bill English, and Mary English was standing behind him. I did ask her, I said, how are you feeling about all of this? How did you feel that night? It must have been bloody awful.
Bloody awful. And we'd sat around for days. And I mean, you know some of the people that used to work for me and with me and how lucky we were. Well, we were all going troppo, right? Because, you kind of couldn't leave because you might, and all the rest of it. But it had been, and then you kind of in your gut, you knew he wasn't going to choose us.
Yeah.
But you still had hope.
Yeah.
And of course you had to go in with hope because afterwards I was just like, why did I even believe for a minute that he might go with us? Well, actually you had to have that level of belief, otherwise you wouldn't have gone to negotiations as fulsome as you needed to. So, yeah, I was gutted. I was as gutted for Bill as I was for anything else because I really felt like he had unfinished work as Prime Minister.
Well, he did an amazing job in that last year when you consider it,
yeah.
To maintain the National Party's lead.
Yeah.
And to deliver it on the day, which was pretty extraordinary, really.
No, I went round playing Dixie Chicks, I'm Not Ready to Make Nice, about Winston Peters for a good few months there.
I think Winston might be playing that himself.
Yeah, he might be. Barry, so great to see you again, and thank you for joining us today. All the best with Iggy, and if people want more from you, they can hear you on Newstalk ZB. And that is a wrap for this episode of Ask Me Anything. You can get in touch with me by emailing askpaula@nzherald.co.nz. Please feel free to send me through your questions for the podcast or any thoughts you have. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Please do follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can read my weekly column in the Herald on Sunday. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.